The time now is 10 to 9. Feeling in need of a bit of inspiration? Then do have a listen to this. At the age of 13, William Carter couldn't read. He grew up as a young carer for his mother, who had autism and learning disabilities, before going to live with his grandparents. At school, William's dyslexia wasn't spotted by teachers and caused him all sorts of problems. But despite all of that, William went on to graduate with a first-class degree from Bristol, has won a prestigious Fulbright scholarship and is now studying for a PhD at Berkeley in California. William's been telling me about the kind of challenges he faced as a mixed-race pupil with severe dyslexia and dyspraxia, and the kind of bullying language he had to endure.
It wasn't until year 9 when I started taking my GCSEs that I learned how to read. And in terms of writing, I couldn't write more than, say, 3 or 4 successfully until I got to A-level. I come from a family with a long history of kind of learning disabilities and dyslexia. So, my aunt's dyslexic, my mum's got specific learning disabilities as well. And so that was a kind of huge problem I faced going on. This combination of coming from a family with specific learning disabilities and arriving dyslexic myself.
And what was it like for you with the other children?
So it was very alienating and very isolating. So one of my most traumatic memories from that time as it pertains to kind of dyslexia is I remember sitting in a bathtub and I remember scrubbing the pigment off my skin. And the reason I did that is because I was so isolated and so alienated, and I went to a predominantly white and middle class school in primary school. It meant that because I wasn't yet diagnosed with dyslexia, I thought the reason I was so far behind, the reason I was so alienated from my peers, made to feel so isolated, made to feel so stupid, was my skin tone. It really and truly depressed me to the point where I was actually sent to child and adolescent mental health at the age of kind of around about 6 or 7 before I was diagnosed with kind of depression, anxiety, because I said trying to make friends, trying to kind of socialize in a classroom when you're perpetually in the lowest set, when you're perpetually catching up, when you can perpetually not quite write down everything that's on the board, when you're not making those goals of development that everyone else is. It was a truly kind of isolating and alienating experience for me.
So alienating and so difficult for you. Mm-hmm. So how did you manage to overcome that?
So there was a series of developments. So I think the main one was getting diagnosed with dyslexia quite late on in primary school. And then the transition to secondary school I found even harder. When I got to secondary school, I was getting about C's and D's. And what that meant is because I was getting passable grades, my secondary school was like, wait a minute, Will. The students at risk we need to support. The students who are getting Fs and Us we need to support, and that meant it got into kind of year 9 when I was about 13 that I was ready to kind of admit to my teachers that that messy handwriting. Well, I'm actually just covering from the fact I can't write. Or when you asked me to read in class at one time, I found that absolutely daunting. Still to this day, even though I'm a Fulbright scholar and I got a first at Bristol, the most daunting thing I can be asked to do is read in front of a classroom.
And there was one particular episode where you were being taught the Steinbeck novel of Mice and Men.
Yeah, that still haunts me. So I was in one of my English classes, and my school is superb other than that. But there's just one episode that I think really tainted my experience, where we were learning about Mice and Men, about Lenny. And my English teacher, in describing Lenny, used the word retard. And coming from a family of people with autism and dyslexia and dyspraxia and mental health, I wasn't going to kind of let that stand. So I voiced my concern about it. And in doing so, I was challenged. I was told, no, this is the way I would speak. The word's perfectly fine. I said, no, it wasn't. And in that kind of conversation, I was told, wait, Will, do you identify with Lenny then? Are you a retard? And then kind of comments and sniggering from the class and this general kind of atmosphere of, go on, read then or write then. In other words, you're verbally confident, but you can't kind of walk the walk.
Your teacher said that to you?
Yeah. And it was horrifying. And I think I spent the rest of my secondary school, bear in mind I was in the lowest sets again until the age of 16 until I finished my secondary school, really kind of competing with that fact and really kind of living in the wake, I guess, of that statement. The bit when it kind of changed for me is when I started my A-levels. I went from being in the lowest sets for every subject and being repeatedly called stupid and tainted to getting one of the highest A-level results a school had ever seen.
I mean, it really is quite an extraordinary thing to listen to, and the way that you did so well in your A-levels, getting a first at Bristol and then going on to win a Fulbright scholarship. despite the trauma of your early years. Is there anything that you could think of that would, as advice to other youngsters in a similar situation, or to people and teachers, to avoid this kind of thing happening again?
The hardest fight you'll ever have is securing a diagnosis. I mean, I would never have been diagnosed with dyslexia now, losing half a year of teaching time. And so there's a real problem there. And I really hope that coming out of the pandemic, we can kind of stop teaching to this idea or this myth of the average learner and start teaching to the edges. In other ways, start teaching people who are dyslexics, dyspraxics, autistics with the same attention to detail and the same commitment as the way we teach non-autistics or non-dyslexics or dyspraxics.
William Carter, thank you so much for talking to us.
More on William in the iPaper this morning, where he's described as a student who defied the odds. He is now just 22 years old. It is 4 minutes to 9. And